Find out, and we have two powerhouse teams that were just torn apart like soft bread. It's relatively surprising as well. The one advantage that you do have if you're Method Black is they just got the 3-0 in their pocket. So they have kind of a different momentum here, Zico.
Yeah, they're coming in hot after momentum. Of course, Baba's boys just got a crushing defeat here, and they know they're up against Method Black, arguably just as good at playing that Rogue Mage Druid. So they know, oh, we couldn't really do much with our comps against that Rogue Mage Druid. Now we're going to go up against another one down in that lower bracket. And of course, it's got to be demotivating to just have lost those 3 games.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not a fun thing to do. As somebody who's competed before in a tournament, what do you actually typically do to shake off a series like that?
I don't know. You just have to shake it off. I mean, you lose a lot on the ladder, so... I don't know. Was that shots fired? I can't really tell.
No, that wasn't a shot fired at all. Who am I to be firing shots right now?
But basically,
you said you lose a lot at the ladder. I thought that was a shot at me.
No. No. So basically, what happens, especially early on, if you're a new team, at least in my experience, is you'll lose a game and then you won't really talk about what went wrong. You won't realize, like, hey, maybe this composition isn't necessarily the best. Instead, you pay attention to little things like, man, if I had just gotten that polymorph off, we would have won the game.
Or that ice block off.
Yeah, exactly. But in the big picture, those things really... But in the big picture, see, this is what I'm talking about. I can never tell with you. But in the big picture, those little things don't matter as much. So, like an experienced roster, after you make those mistakes time after time, you're like, okay, well, you know what? We need to take a couple minutes. We need to take a breather, realize, shake off that loss. What could have gone better? Were those the best compositions? These are the things that Baba's boys need to really be paying attention to. What maps do they want to bring it to? Because it is likely they know Method Black's going to be going with that Rogue Mage Druid.
I think that's the important thing, though, that also becomes tough, right? Because they didn't have that much time. You talk about like regaining, they do have to do it very quickly here. It's tough.
One comp I was kind of wondering about that I wanted to ask Zico about was Warrior Mage Druid. Like, I wonder if Warrior Mage Druid is something, maybe it's not, the best answer. Maybe it's a little bit unfavored against Rogue Mage Druid, but it is a possibility that they run that. I mean, they picked up Morrow, they have Blizz on Warrior, Looney on Druid, and maybe that would give them a better fighting chance.
With a Fire Mage then?
Or a Frost Mage.
Or a Frost Mage. I mean, it's probably better than what they ran in the previous matchup in general, but I don't think it's like a favored matchup to win it, because what it comes down to is that the Rogue is going to be very slippery. He's going to be able to reset a lot, run away a lot, because he's going to be the main target, I'm assuming here. And the Warrior, on the other hand, when dampening gets deep enough, we're going to maybe see swaps to Blizzo, similarly to what we saw in Asherman's Fall when they played. But I do agree it would have been a better choice, probably, at least compared to the Ellie Warrior. And I think the Windwalker DK is a solid choice as well. They just don't look like they have the reps on it. So at least this way they would have a triple main comp as well. I would like to see them pick it maybe at least once and try it.
I do a brief shout out here to you. #1 in 16 seasons. You just saw that pop up on the screen. Talking about Mage right now, this is somebody who's done it countless times. I feel like that's always one of the things that is so fun, hearing you guys discuss Mage, trying to figure out when it is going to work, both of you playing that class so much. Sid, what do you think here, though? We do talk about the Mage Warrior, how this is something that we expect to see in the meta. Is this the time to break it out?
It's risky. I mean, it could work. Typically, we see Rogue Mage a little bit more dominant because the Rogue stun lock is a bit longer. The Rogue is more slippery, more options to survive later in the game. But the Warrior, I don't think they should. I feel like they have never practiced that comp because it's not a very strong comp on ladder typically, or at least for a while. I think the last time it was a strong ladder comp was Mists of Pandaria, so teams just don't have the experience on it. I think they're going to play something else.
Wow.
I wasn't expecting this.
I'm actually really surprised Method Black just didn't go with the Rogue Mage Druid. That makes me feel like they're not confident in the Rogue Mage Druid.
It's a wizard war.
It's funny because that is something that has almost happened to them throughout a few seasons, when you would typically expect them with Waz and Raikou to be a team that wants to spam that. We have seen a big change since Swabsy has entered the fray. We got a mirror matchup. Who's going to be able to take game #1?
I think I know why Method Black played this, because they thought Windwalker DK maybe was going to happen, and this might just counter it entirely. And then Method Black were thinking, well, if they mirror us, we can just beat them in the mirror. Basically, Zeepai goes head-to-head with Swapsy, Raikou goes head-to-head with Morrow, Looney goes head-to-head with Chaz, and they're playing identical compositions. So whoever plays, it comes completely down to who outperforms who. There's no compositional advantage.
I feel like this is going to be one of those games that goes on for a long time. Maro, Zeepai, Raikou, Swapsy, they're going to be able to free cast a lot of damage. I think pushing in for crowd control, especially early on, the risk is not worth the reward. So if the mages are going to use their blinks aggressively, try to get crowd controlled, first of all, there's no real setup for them besides, you know, if Raikou wanted to push in Chaz, I guess could go in for a bash on Looney, but it's so easy to shut down. So what ends up happening in a matchup like this is both teams, they just basically do as much damage as possible. In the late game, what it's going to come down to is blink counter spells from Raikou, from Maro onto the opposing druids with the Kleptomania, a lot of burst damage, and try to win that way.
I'm curious to see if there's any talent choices that are different between the two teams. It's not apparent on the UI here. I would almost assume that they're playing almost identical. I guess Overgrowth, one different decision from Looney and Chaz. What possibly would Chaz be running outside of Overgrowth? You can imagine Cyclone is being locked in. Chaz actually getting bashed though, getting bursted down. He's caught in midfield. Trades out Barkskin, quick swift men, and able to get away. Looney is running Balance Affinity, so they're going to switch some attention. The Druids may actually be the kill targets in this matchup as both of them are playing Balance Affinity. Looney now gets caught. If this situation occurs in Dampening, I don't think either one of them gets away with their lives.
Yep, and both teams just looking for some damage. Once again, the Frost Mage is building up by spamming out the Frost Bolts, building up their procs, building up their Icicles, and that's when they can really let it rip, especially when the enemy Druid's pushing in like that. Both Druids looking for the bashes, so I think you're right, Sid. I think what it's going to come down to is if an enemy Druid plays a little bit too aggressive, you can really punish them with that bash and with that Frost Mage, Elemental Shaman burst damage.
All right, at this point, both Druids running Nourish, so a very long-ranged heal that's relatively inexpensive and powerful. So when you're playing Restoration Druid and you're playing with Mages, Elementals, Warlocks, Balance Druids, even Shadow Priests, you want to be running Nourish, playing very far away. And this is because your DPS members will be tanking interrupts and you can get away with that greedy healing selection. Typically, if you're healing two melee classes, you won't be able to get away with that choice. Well, you can try. So in this setup, the Druids are going to be posted up very far away as basically both teams tee off on each other, dealing as much damage as possible. But because of this Nourish selection and the positioning currently being played, it is likely necessary for Dampening to be in the game for either side to end the match, as neither Druid is really going to make a mistake at this high level of play. Swapsy seems to be on the back foot currently in this position, but Maro and Zeepai seem the ones pulling back. And I'm not sure if pulling back is the right way to win this, because now Raikou and Swapsy, they're getting pretty close to Looney, and they could make a switch to him.
I'm trying to tell, why is Maro Dark Iron Dwarf? What did they think they were going to run into in this matchup? And that can kind of give us a clue as to what they were thinking going into this blind pick. Maro probably was a little bit afraid of potentially the Rogue Mage. That's why he went for the Dark Iron Dwarf, knowing he might be a target in that matchup. So maybe that's what they were expecting. Unfortunately for them, Method Black, they tried to throw them a curveball as well. I feel like both teams, this is what they were expecting going into this matchup.
I don't think they were at all. Babo's boys were most certainly expecting Rogue Mage, and Method Black were maybe expecting Windwalker DK, so they prepared for something that neither team actually initiated the series on, and they've been left in this position, which is a bit awkward. Chaz overextended, gets caught in midfield by Looney. Looney also exposes himself to some crowd control, though. Nice punish on the part of Raikou. Maro getting cycloned up, though. It doesn't seem like they're going to be going after him. Instead, trying to go after Swapsy. He's kiting around the pillar with Raikou, snaring up Zeepai, making it difficult to connect. I think Dampening is just a necessary evil in this matchup, in particular with Wizard Wars currently in the meta. Zeepai getting Lightning Lassoed away, and nice Thunderstorm actually knocking Swapsy out of range and interrupting the spell. That could be a play that he looks to make deeper into Dampening in the game and then reverse the pressure, so definitely look out for Thunderstorms on those Lightning Lassos to interrupt.
Yeah, and this is one of those matchups that really does come down to damage, like who's doing their rotation better, building up pressure for their team, interrupting the right spells, creating these little windows of opportunity, and I really feel like the game will eventually come down to one of two things. Either a blink counterspell with Kleptomania, so you counterspell the Druid, then you remove all the hots and burst someone down low, especially in Dampening, or one of these Druids is going to get a little bit too aggressive.
There he is. Our buddy Dampening is arrived at 1% healing reduction. It will stack up over time, reducing healing and making it incredibly difficult for either side to recover through burst damage. And now both teams will start to ramp up the aggression moving forward. Maro and Looney playing defensive. Chaz is trying to push forward and maybe initiated an attack, but Zeepai has thwarted his push and caught him now in center field. Not enough. They're actually going for the Maledicts, and now they're going to Cyclone him at low health. A bit of a wasted Maledict in that attempt, unless they decide to somehow capitalize off the back of it. No, Chaz dispels, immediately retreats away. Maro dropping a Frozen Orb out there towards Swapsy, trying to build up some pressure, but really not finding too much damage, so switching their attention to Raikou. And it's basically whoever is most furthest away from a pillar, you attack that target with everything you've got. And if he goes to a pillar, you find something else. And then if you can stack the team up behind the pillar, you dogpile on top of them and cleave all 3 targets. So currently, you want to play a little bit away so you don't stack, but not so far away that you risk getting exploded.
Yep, I definitely don't want to get exploded in a matchup like this, and that could be what it comes down to, just big moments of burst damage in a short window. Frost Mages, when they have all their damage available, they have the Comet Storm, the Ice Crown with the Frozen Orb. It can be scary. Zeepai could be in a little trouble here. Ray of Frost gets used by Raikou, but an immediate counterspell by Maro. Now Swapsy putting more pressure on Zeepai with the Lightning Lasso as he does get lower. Good crowd control initiated by Method Black, but Looney now free in the Moonkin form. There's going to be no follow-up from Raikou. Unfortunately, not going to be able to find those polymorphs, and Maro does get topped off.
No significant mana advantage on either side. Cooldown-wise, Baba's boys are behind in this current moment, but that could swing at any point. We see Chaz get counterspelled. As Venruki pointed out at the start of the match, that blue icon next to the Druid's frame means that he's interrupted and can't heal. Now a Cyclone next to it, Chaz still can't heal, and Raikou is very low on health. He's trying to hold on to his Ice Block, his most powerful defensive, but the longer he holds on to it, the more likely they will overlap, and there is a critical overlap here for Raikou. Suddenly, Baba's boys have put themselves back in the fight, and there's a bit of a target selection difference between the teams. We see Raikou and Swapsy targeting Zeepai, whereas Maro and Zeepai are targeting Raikou. And so far, I think targeting the Mage is probably the best overall. How do you feel?
I feel like what matters the most is just picking a target that's overstaying its welcome. So Raikou is just in the open a little bit too long. They got the momentum, and I think Kleptomania really gives you a lot of freedom of going on whatever target you want. You can just remove the hots off of anybody, and that gives you a moment of burst damage. Definitely, it seemed like going after Raikou there was good. Maro was able to build up a lot of damage. They got the crowd control chain, and they ended up pulling out that first Ice Block from Raikou. And I expect, since that happened, Raikou will play a little bit safer. You can see he's positioning far away. Doesn't want to leave his Resto Druid at all. So now that he's a slight vulnerability, pushing in, getting aggressive, maybe not the best idea, though. He still does have 1 Ice Block left. Maro midfield taking quite a bit of damage. Looney, uncontested, can spam out some Nourishes to keep him alive. Zeepai just putting out pressure onto Swapsy, and they're kind of just hitting whoever. Ray of Frost. Maro gets interrupted on the Lightning Lasso. Now some burst coming in from Method Black onto Maro as he gets lower in this matchup. This is the Icy Veins from Raikou. He wants to get really aggressive and try to at least force out an Ice Block. Ray of Frost does get used, but Maro blinks away. He's using the Prismatic Cloak. So anytime Maro does blink away, it's going to avoid all spell damage by 50%. Despite that, still forced into his first Ice Block.
Chaz getting intercepted on this push and punished, forced away, and as dampening mounts higher and higher, they will not be able to recover from these critical burst moments. The teams have evened out cooldown-wise, with Maro having 1 more Ice Block remaining, as well as Raikou. So it's still anyone's match, and it's getting chaotic here as dampening gets even higher. Looney trying to pick up Maro, but having a difficult time cycling up Swapsy. Looney crossing the map, going aggressive on Chaz, securing some crowd control and looking for the final Ice Block on Raikou. Ebon Bolt being channeled by Maro. That will connect as Raikou gets bursted. Barely hanging on here. He needs to be careful. He's very low on health. Going down without Ice Blocking would be a critical mistake. Chaz gets stunned on his trinket. Baba's boys have all the momentum. Raikou hiding for his life right here in game 1. Will they be able to close is the question. They still can't push him over. Lightning Lasso should be enough. Star Search from Looney even. How is he not Ice Blocking in this position? Raikou, man, getting cycloned at low health. Desperately trying to stay even on cooldowns, but it could cost him his life if he plays this risky.
Yeah, but it also kept an Ice Block, and there's a fine line in between Ice Blocking too early and just not using it. And an expert mage like Raikou is able to walk that rope and basically make that decision. It's a tough call, though. Definitely a little bit of extra burst damage. Raikou could have easily gone down in that situation, but now he's in a good spot. He actually has his second Ice Block coming up before Maro, so I think holding on to that, really trusting his teammates, avoiding damage was the right play.
Interesting. So Chaz is actually running Mark of the Wild and Looney isn't, and Mark of the Wild reduces fire and frost damage, which is really good against an elemental shaman and a frost mage. So Chaz's team actually takes 15% less damage in the game, and that may be a deciding factor as we move into dampening, where damage reduction is more valuable than healing. Crowd control, though, secured on Chaz. Baba's Boy's initiation has been far superior to Method Black's in this initial exchange, but both mages could be trouble here as they're caught in midfield. Raikou gets knocked in the open, but Maro is still falling behind. He wants to hold on to that ice block. He wants to keep the game at least even on cooldowns. Looney stalls it out, saving him for now, but Chaz is still moving forward. With the Cyclone at low health, Maro's in a desperate situation. Dampening is just getting to critical mass, and Looney can't recover. Tons of damage to follow through. A counter spell secured. This could close the game. Second ice block forced. Method Black have the lead, and they may just close this out if they can keep this chain going on Looney.
This is really scary for Maro.
Hibernate!
Looney gets caught into Hibernate. Maro all by himself in the lightning lasso. Swapsy trying to finish him off. Somehow Maro's still alive. Nice clone. Freezing up Maro's HP by Chaz. Bash now on Chaz. He has his trinket as they make a swap onto him. Using the bark skin. Maro getting low. Has the icy veins. Looking to counter pressure. Both teams could be in trouble here, but ultimately I think Baba's Boys are the one that is really far behind. Looney activating his Iron Bark on Maro, trying to keep him alive, but still no ice block for another 3 minutes. If you look at Raikou, he's going to have 2 ice blocks in a minute, so it's a big lead for Method Black.
Okay, it's anyone's game. They're going for Swapsy. They see him exposed and getting bursted down. Chaz trinkets to save him. Maro is still low. Maledix, though, connects. Swapsy gets dispelled. Z-Pi is getting cleaved down. The health is just not resetting. Dampening at such critical mass. Barely hanging in. Maro getting cycloned up. Raikou's about to have 2 ice blocks. If he just plays patient for 26 seconds, they'll have a massive lead. It's Swapsy that needs to be careful before that point. He's an exposed target. Maro's an exposed target. It's a race to the finish, but Swapsy just throws the game away potentially here, and he falls. Baba's Boys find an opening and take full advantage.
That did not look like the way it was going to be closing out, but Baba's Boys going to take that first win. Zico, I kind of have a weird question for you right now. When we look at the current meta, right, and we see Resto Druids being so strong, allowing teams to go into dampening so comfortably, does that actually hurt a team like Looney's team that traditionally does play in dampening so much, because now other teams have more tools to play the strategy that they're typically so much better at than any other team?
Well, previously, the way it's been has been that if you play against a lot of these disc freeze compositions and you make it to dampening, you're basically going to win the game. But now, with the additional healing that Resto Druids have received, it just makes it so that you can play Resto Druid and you can basically pick a Rogue and a Destro Warlock like we saw in NA. We can see a melee cleave come out with that Resto Druid. We can see a lot of different options with that Resto Druid. And for the most part, it's going to be comps that are sturdy enough to get to that deep portion of dampening. Whereas before, when XRB, Baba's Boys, formerly XRB, used to play, we saw a different kind of thing, because once they got to dampening, they had such a big lead. Now it's kind of a toss-up more. So yes, the short answer is it definitely does hurt them a little bit, that everyone can kind of get to their territory.
Their win condition, right? It's a weird thing, because your visceral reaction when you see, oh, it's a meta that goes into dampening, Looney and everybody on Baba's Boys should just be having a field day, but it does seem to be the opposite.
Yeah, a lot of these teams, they just, if they make it to dampening and they get a big chunk of damage onto someone, that can completely swing the tides. Whereas before, we always saw these guys kind of have their opponents in a chokehold, always shutting down those setups. Now, that's not going to be as easy to do, because it's a lot more forgiving when you have a really good Resto Druid on your roster. A lot of healing to just kind of recover those situations.
Decisions with the Monk, with the Shadow Priest. It almost looks like that here, though, is what I'm hearing from you guys. You don't expect to see this mirror, Zico.
I honestly don't expect to see this mirror, but at the same time, I'm happy to see it, because these are players that have been kind of rivaling each other for such a long time in terms of skill. It's fun to see actually how they play out the matchup, and just little different things that they do. Looney playing the Overgrowth, Chaz playing Mark of the Wild, Raikou playing that concentrated coolness, Maro going for a little bit more defensive talents like the Prismatic Cloak, which reduces damage for 2 seconds when you blink by half. So Maro opting out for that defense defensive talent choice, whereas Raikou going for that aggressive talent choice. And Raikou was getting the better end of Maro when both teams were focusing the mage. But then, of course, also the mid-game adaptations in deep dampening, swapping over to Zipai. It's just these little things that these teams do. It's very interesting to me to watch.
All right, well, keep your eyes on some of these little nuances, the changes in the mirror about how both teams do approach it as the gates now open.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is an elimination series in the lower bracket. The winner of this will advance for a shot at the Chalky Milkmen, a rematch against them, in fact. Surprising that Method Black is not going to their traditional rogue mage composition that we know and love them for, instead opting to go for the Wizard War and continue this attrition fight against Baba's boys, who got the upper hand in game 1. Swapsy is going to have to play on the edge of his seat. He cannot afford to cost his team the game here in game number 2 as it was in game number 1, although it is likely that this match will go on for some time, barring a mistake by either team. Looney is actually being the aggressor in this matchup. I think he got shadow melded on his bash. Chaz now reversing it with a bash of his own, trying to set up for crowd control, but gets denied. Good denial there by Baba's boys.
Yeah, very nicely done. I think Maro actually switched his talent over to Concentrated Coolness as well, so now he has that ranged Frozen Orb he can just place on the ground. And in a matchup like this where you kind of want to play far away, it is important. Swapsy taking some damage right now. Maro looking for a Blizzard once again, but I think if Method Black, they play defensive at this point in the game, it's just too easy for Chaz to top off Swapsy. It's going to be really difficult to take him down. What really matters is later on in the game when healing is reduced. But it looks like both teams are opting to play really aggressive, not like on Nagrand Arena, both of them pushing in. Looney does have to use his Bark Skin, has Iron Bark for Zipai. The damage is sort of run out. With the way Frost Mage works, I kind of explained it in the last game. You build up your damage with Frost Bolts, you gain Icicles, you gain Fingers of Frost, you gain Brain Freeze, then you have your Ice Nova, your Comet Storm, and you have your Frozen Orb. And once those are gone, your damage kind of runs out, and it's hard to finish people off. You have to kill people in those short burst windows.
The fact that Baba's boys locked this composition, Maro on Mage and Zipai on Shaman, blind into Method Black, makes me think that this is something they're going to use against the Chalky Milkmen if they make it to the finals. They saw it work for Method Black against Minpoike's team, at least in one match, and it may just be their best option that's the most prepared for right now. Currently both Shamans as the targets before dampening. Now with Healing Surge as support spell on that Elemental Shaman, it's unlikely to go down before dampening, especially as they're hiding around these corners and avoiding the hard-hitting spells. Both Druids, no significant edge on either side there as their mana is basically topped off. Moving forward, a Frozen Orb plays down here for the team of Baba's boys as they initiate another attack towards Swapsy, catching him in that Lightning Lasso. You always want to be paying attention to Lightning Lasso when an Elemental Shaman is in the arena, as it stuns the opponent in place and deals a whole lot of damage. Whereas for the mages, what you want to keep your eyes open for is that spinning disco ball of ice as it plays down on the ground, cleaving down multiple targets and boosting the damage of Ice Lance. These two abilities, when combined together, do a dynamic duo of damage, and in dampening could just be the death of somebody in the match.
Yeah, Looney positioning far away, looking like he wants to sit down for a drink. Both Druids going to have to consider their mana, especially before dampening. Later on in the game, healing is too required. It's really hard to top off your team, so you have to use globals. Sitting down for a drink is much more difficult, whereas at this stage, right before dampening, you want to make sure you sit down, you're able to regenerate your mana so you can go as long as possible when the healing really matters.
All right, at this point, still no significant edge as both teams are a little bit reluctant to make a push. Zipai is actually the only player forward. I guess Swapsy is as well. Both Elemental Shamans kind of taking an aggressive stance on the opposing Mage and Druid to get something done, but just unable to at this point in the match. Raikou actually using Counterspell on Maro. That tells me that he really wants to focus on more of just survive right now, make it to dampening, and then start making some flashy plays. We see Lightning Lasso on Maro. He is not that overextended. Looney in line of sight using Nourish to restabilize him quite effectively. Chaz actually trying to cross the map. I'm curious what he was really trying to do there. He ends up just going back to the pillar and not getting too much done, but didn't expose himself to any devastation. Zipai's got Stormkeeper rolling right now. That boosts his Lightning Bolt's damage here towards Raikou as he's bursted down below half, blinking back to safety. In the meantime, we see Swapsy trying to make a swap, but gets denied. Looney backing up his team quite effectively there to just completely stall out the match.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, you know, if Method Black does end up winning this series, if they can come back and take game number 2 and ultimately 3 and 4, what are they going to do in the grand finals? Are they going to go with that Rogue Mage setup? Are they going to continue to try to run this composition into that Rogue Mage? It's just, I'm really curious about that, because them not locking it in makes me feel like they're not super confident in it right now, or maybe they just actually don't feel like it's a good matchup.
I'm not sure as we move deeper into dampening. Swapsy getting cut down at the moment and looking to reverse the pressure on Zeepai. Not really able to get too much done, but there it is, the magical number at the top of our screen, dampening to reduce the incoming healing and inevitably close this match out. Even if they do not want it to, it will come to an end as healing is significantly reduced. Moving forward, Raikou in midfield, Maro blinking back to the defense of the pillar, actually with that prismatic cloak, reducing some damage on that flurry. It was a well-timed blink on Maro's part. Raikou not actually in a great spot. He's very exposed out there in center field, but doesn't seem to care. Zeepai actually getting crushed here by Swapsy. Maro is forced to save him with a counter spell, trying to cone a cold snare Swapsy to cast, but not going to be taking that exchange, retreating back out of line of sight as soon as possible. Having seen Frozen Orb committed, there's no reason to go for an attack. Now that it's over, it's time to go, so Raikou's just immediately going to retreat away next to Chaz. Swapsy is quite overextended. Looney tries to cross the map, gets intercepted, immediately pulls back. As we move into dampening, if any member on either team makes too aggressive of a positional push, they can just get erased from the match. I can only imagine that Swapsy was not expecting to go down when he did in game number 1, and something like that could occur again. So both teams are playing it overly cautious as they both face elimination.
Yeah, it is really important that these teams are playing as cautious as possible. We are at 10% dampening, and it's only going to get more scary. Chaz sitting down for a drink. Looney trying to shut it down, but Chaz actually gets the re-stealth, pushing in now. A bash. Looney looking to get aggressive. Chaz actually trinkets out of it. Raikou taking some burst damage. He could be in a little bit of trouble. Maro bursting him down a little bit. The Frozen Orb does connect, but not going to be doing too much with Chaz's Iron Bark and his Trinket. He commits a lot of his defensives to keep his team alive, but that was a nice push from the Baba's Voice, who wants to get aggressive first.
Zeepai getting cycloned up in midfield. He could be an exposed target as they're trying to hold him in place with that Blizzard. Zeepai getting just kind of destroyed right now, and this is what I meant. Positionally, if you get exposed, you're going to be crushed. Looney is going to beef up Zeepai and allow him to stay in the fight and get aggressive here towards Swapsy with Lightning Lasso, and Zeepai runs around the corner to avoid being interrupted. Good positioning, but not enough damage to really back up off the back of that. We see crowd control on both Raikou and Swapsy. Looney looks like he wants to make a push, but he's a bit reluctant. He's actually out in midfield. I'd almost like to see them switch to him if he stays there. He's trying to pull back, doesn't want to overextend too far as he will be bursted down if he does. Raikou the target at the moment. As we moved into deep dampening, we saw the mages as a focus point, so a lot of stress put on them here to try and stay ahead on ice blocks. They need some well-timed blinks and good positioning to cool down their opponents.
That really what it comes down to. You want to have interrupts at the right times when it matters. Don't want to be randomly throwing out your counterspell and your wind shear, your grounding totem. Once again, Baba's Boys looking to get aggressive. Bash on Chaz. Swapsy taking some damage, but Swapsy seems to be playing much more defensive in this match. Like we said, he was the target in the last game. Now it looks like he is not afraid to run, hide when he really needs to. He wants to hold on to that Astral Shift, especially as dampening does get higher and higher. If we look at mana, both Druids are basically identical at this point. I don't think we're going to see any drinks. Maybe Looney, with the way he's positioned, could sit down here and try to get some sips, but as long as Method Black keep up the pressure, the damage on Zeepai and Maro, I don't think Looney can afford to do so.
It's kind of interesting that even though Looney and Chaz are playing pretty drastically different talents, the outcome of the match doesn't seem to be that significantly impacted by it. I would almost say that Looney may be disadvantaged, as Nourish is a very high exposed spell to counter spell, whereas Mark the Wild is just simply instantly applied to your team to reduce damage. I think that Chaz may be making the smarter decision on that front, at least in terms of the outcome of these matches so far. I'd really actually like to see a damage breakdown between the teams to see if there is a significant difference in damage output, because I would expect that Chaz's team is taking less overall than the Baba's Boys, but that may not actually be the case. Dampening now at 25% and mounting higher and higher to reduce incoming healing. We see a Maledict's assault here towards Raikou, and might be a bit premature. Now Maro getting reversaled with the Maledicts of their own. He's playing Dark Iron Dwarf to actually remove the Maledict's trinkets, which is an interesting decision. I think Swapsy is also playing Dwarf, so they can use their racials to remove that powerful PvP trinket Gladiator's Maledict, and that's a very high-level decision on their part. Not something that I was really considering for the matchup. Typically, we only consider Dwarf against bleed effects like Feral Druids and Assassination Rogues, but it's also quite effective against this new Trinket, and something you may want to try and look out to try on live servers as well.
Yeah, no question about it. Chaz, the Ring of Frost on him actually broke. I'm not exactly sure what broke that Ring of Frost, but unfortunately wasn't secured there by Morrow. Swapsy getting lightning lassoed by Zeepai. Raikou responds immediately with a counterspell. Looney positioning far away once again. 31% dampening at this point. Chaz gets wind sheared, and actually Method Black looks like they're falling behind, but they're still pushing in. Zeepai could be in some trouble. Lightning lasso does come. Looks like Looney is going to trinket, use the Iron Bark to keep Zeepai alive, hold on to that Astral Shift. Counter pressure now coming in from Zeepai a little bit onto Swapsy and Raikou, but it seems like Method Black is ahead in terms of cooldowns.
This is what I was expecting with Looney's choice in Nourish, is that his mana would be better than Chaz, and it's finally starting to establish itself. So Chaz is forced to go in that corner far away, sit in stealth and drink to regenerate his mana, and that drink is going to give him a massive lead now moving forward. They're slightly behind on cooldowns and now significantly behind on mana, and Method Black could be the ones to take this in their favor. Raikou getting counterspelled as we see Baba's Boys trying to burst him, but he is able to retreat back to safety. Morrow is now exposed. Swapsy tearing in. Raikou moving forward. We can see the Baba's Boys positioned a lot more aggressively and out in midfield. That's going to make them a lot more vulnerable as their point of retreat is further away than both Raikou and Swapsy's. Frozen Orb placed here for Raikou. He really wants to get some damage done. Morrow getting knocked into the team, but Swapsy is exposed once again. Will he fall like number one? Tons of damage. Maledict's committed. Chaz trinkets out, but it may not be enough as Baba's Boys go all in on Swapsy. Swapsy doing what he can to deny it, using Lightning Lasso as an interrupt, but was not able to break up the chain. Instead, now switching their attention to Raikou. Pressure points on two players as Chaz is still crowd controlled and unable to heal. This is easily going to be an ice block. Raikou trying to hold on to it as he blinks back to the pillar. Zeepai not enough damage to force that ice block, and even though they've got a lot of pressure, if they can't get the cooldowns, Chaz may be able to recover and even things out.
Yeah, it looks like Chaz is able to recover at 42% dampening. Zeepai wants to keep up the pressure, though. He's going to be pushing in. Raikou trying to reset his damage, throwing out a Blizzard onto Morrow, making him snared. More difficult for him to push in, but also resets that valuable Frozen Orb cooldown for him. Every time Blizzard does damage, Frozen Orb cooldown does get reduced. Zeepai into the Lightning Lassos. Looney now positioned very far away. He does not want to mess around, get over aggressive, just really relying on Zeepai and Morrow to put out a good amount of pressure. But if Raikou can land a good blink counterspell, he just used it on Zeepai, but later on in the game, I really feel like Raikou, he can blink in, he can counterspell that Nourish with a Kleptomania and a Lightning Lasso. Maybe they could take someone down. It's just difficult because Morrow and Zeepai, they have so many interrupts available to them as the Mage, as the Elemental Shaman to slow down the damage, slow down the game.
I think Morrow and Zeepai must be doing more damage per second. Raikou is just never getting stabilized. It could be the difference between Nourish and Ice Block forced here onto Raikou. Chaz doesn't have access to that big heal Nourish, whereas Looney does. He can just beef his team back up while being exposed to counterspell. It is still a stronger heal. Lightning Lasso. Baba's Boys have the cooldown advantages. No, they don't. And Zeepai actually gets Cyclone now at low health. Well timed by Chaz. This is desperate for Baba's Boys. Zeepai could fall if they can set up any damage off the back of the Cyclone. Chaz tries to switch it. Doesn't get the switch. Gets denied. Good support by Zeepai as Looney desperately tries to recover. Not able to get a Cyclone as Swapsy ducks out of line of sight. Morrow's in crowd control. Not able to support, but Zeepai is a lot more exposed in this position than Swapsy, and he could actually fall if any crowd control hits Looney here. Nourish is being casted. Lightning Lasso. Morrow can't support just yet. And that Lightning Lasso fully channeled. Looney has to just beast through that, and he actually manages to do it quite rapidly, even in the face of 52% dampening. Both teams evening out, but I would say that Baba's Boys are in a bit more trouble.
Yeah, I think so too. But Chaz does push in, gets caught into the bash. Looney looking for the Cyclone. Now Raikou in a little bit of damage. One Gladiator's Maledict on him. Lightning Lasso coming in from Zeepai as well. But Raikou, not necessarily the best target, still has his Ice Block available. Maybe they can burst him down before he could use it. Interrupt him on Frost potentially. Ebon Bolt does get used over onto Zeepai. Lightning Lasso coming in from Swapsy. Does get interrupted. Good backup from Morrow in the matchup. Cyclone over onto Looney. Has to trinket out. He used his Iron Bark. At this point in the game, Iron Bark is not enough. You want to take advantage of the additional healing that Ironbark provides you, but with Zeepai getting offensively Cyclone, Method Black, they are in the driver's seat of this matchup.
It's this icon next to Zeepai's frame. That gray box is a Cyclone. It denies all incoming healing and damage and pauses the player's health for a few moments, and it could be the game-winning factor for Method Black here, as Zeepai is just getting destroyed at the moment. Baba's boys had all of the momentum, but suddenly Method Black have flicked a switch and are doing tons of pressure, forcing Zeepai away. But now Swapsy under fire. He's going to retreat with Chaz for a few moments and start to recover. And I'm curious if this might be the match that we break dampening records. Now it's 60%. I believe 65% is our highest currently this year, and I'm not sure what it was exactly last year, but we must be getting pretty close to it at this point. Looney very low on mana. Chaz with a lead in that regard, but they are behind on ice blocks. Zeepai is the most exposed player currently in this matchup. Raikou second in that regard. But Baba's boys could just be it here in game number 2 as Looney's locked down in crowd control. Zeepai on the run, desperately trying to do whatever he can for Looney to recover with Ray of Frost and tons of damage. He may not be able to make it out alive. 63% healing reduction. Looney doing whatever he can, but not finding really enough to start to get him back to full health. Swapsy low as well. Potential cross kill as both players are dangerously low. Zeepai's trying to cross in the middle of the map. This could be a mistake. The Maledicts connect. Another one will. And Method Black tie this series up 1-1.
And also, we just managed to hit that new record there. 64% dampening was the highest of the season. We hit 65% dampening, and I think we may see these mirrors a bit more. We may have an even newer record in a little bit. Zico, what is it about these two comps that makes them play so late into dampening?
Well, the main thing is, of course, going to be that Elemental Shaman. The Elemental Shaman just offers so much disruption with the Grounding Totem, with the Wind Shear, which is an interrupt on a very low cooldown. And then, of course, the additional healing. You can see Zeepai right there throwing out a healing surge. Even in 60+% dampening, he's going to do 15-20% of his HP bar. It's incredible how good they are. And then, of course, paired that up with the Frost Mage, you're gonna see so much slows, just gonna allow that Elemental Shaman to just freely move around. And as we've seen in both of these games, the Ele Shaman is typically the target that goes down, just because those mages are so durable themselves. And when you have that Frost Mage, assisting that Elemental Shaman with all of that, with all of those extra snares, all of those extra roots, it makes it very, very easy for that Shaman to kind of run laps around that pillar and heal himself up while he's avoiding all of that damage, which of course synergizes with the Druid as well, because he doesn't have to heal as much and can expend some of his mana later on.
Everything. You take that cooldown and you just steal everything away from the target. Very strong, but I want to talk about the Warlock a little bit more, because we talked about the Morrow coming in for Walrick's decision and how it could be something that we weren't 100% sure whether or not it was going to be an advantage for him. In this particular meta, Warlocks are, like Venruki said, just kings.
Well, Morrow actually does play the Warlock, but he just doesn't feel confident, I guess, to actually pick it here. So he's going to go on that Moonkin instead, something that he's been playing in tournaments previously. Honestly, I have to agree with Ven. I would have loved to see the Fire Mage or even the Arcane Mage. This is like the one matchup where I would say maybe the Arcane Mage could be useful, because the game is going to regardless go to super deep dampening, and the Arcane Mage is going to be able to do a lot more than the Frost Mage.
A lot of pressure on Morrow here. They switch things up in this tie. Will it be enough to swing the rhythm in their favor?
You're going to have to wait and see here as Morrow steps in on his balanced Druid, that laser chicken, the crit turkey. Will it be enough? He does provide Moonkin Aura to his team, which increases the critical strike chance of members, which is quite valuable to an Elemental Shaman for his Earth Shocks to deal devastating damage. That amplification could be a deciding factor in this matchup. However, still likely dampening required on each side to execute a kill through the powerful Restoration Druid healing.
Yeah, it is going to be a long game unless we see some surprising, unexpected burst and people don't react accordingly. I think the game's going to come down to, once again, just really the coordinated assault with the Maledict Trinkets. Very important for healing reduction later on. Morrow's going to have to try to find windows of opportunities with his Incarnation. If Raikou and Swapsy are getting over-aggressive, I want to see him use that Incarnation, make sure he's getting the counter pressure, force them away, or you can actually take him down.
So maybe we can take some time to explain the resources here. For Morrow, his health is that orange bar. If it hits 0, he's dead, obviously. But the tiny little bar below it, the slightly lighter blue one, that is called Astral Power. And as he casts damaging spells, that will generate over time to maximum. And he spends that on Star Surge, which is a gigantic, hard-hitting spell there, right casted. And you want to combine that with Incarnation, which he currently has activated as it is glowing. It's going to boost his damage a lot. And he's going to spend that Astral Power on Star Surges to hit people basically really hard, but they see that Incarnation activated and Method Black immediately retreat away from it.
Well, Morrow actually, do Balance Druids have like a mini Incarnation?
They're running the Arcanic Pulsar. It's difficult to see, but every time the Balance Druid casts 9 Star Surges, they will also activate Incarnation for a minor amount of time. This now currently is the more deadly version of it that lasts much, much longer. And during this window of time is when the enemy team needs to be playing defensive, which we do currently see from Method Black with both Raikou, Swapsy, and Chaz hiding back behind the pillar. And as that Incarnation begins to fade, they will then look to attack and get aggressive with Raikou already prematurely blinking into center field. They know Incarnation is over. It's time to start bullying Morrow a bit.
Yep, Raikou looking for some damage on Morrow. Lightning Lasso gets wind sheared immediately by Zeepai. Raikou still just trying to control the game with his Polymorphs, but that's one of the benefits of the Moonkin and that Moonkin form. He's actually immune to Polymorph effects, so Raikou is not going to be able to spam Polymorphs like he could when Morrow was a mage on him, and that will basically not allow him to be as defensive for his team. So Baba's boys do get a little edge there that Morrow is basically completely immune to Polymorph. Another
Arcanic Pulsar Incarnation activation, and Raikou needs to see it. Swapsy's just going to Lightning Lasso and say, no fun for you, Morrow. No Incarnation Burst. Gets denied. Good job by Swapsy. I like his positioning at the pillar here, weaving in and out, keeping Flame Shock on multiple targets, but still kind of getting hit pretty hard at the moment, even at this position. Raikou's Water Elemental is definitely going to be a bit of an annoyance for him against both the Balance Druid and an Elemental Shaman. It's very easy to kill a Water Elemental of a Frost Mage, and it is the only target really before dampening that is going to go down. So they definitely want to make sure they're keeping their damage over time effects on it, hitting it with a couple Lava Bursts when they can, and really losing that advantage that Raikou gains from having the Water Elemental active. If they can kill it off later into the game and deny its resurrection, Raikou does lose out on a lot of damage potential.
Yep, Raikou's still trying to build up some damage. I got to commend Raikou as well. He has high uptime on his Water Elemental. A lot of mages I see, they really neglect their Water Elemental. They don't have it attack and do damage as often as possible, and that Water Elemental damage does eventually add up in a game like this. So nice plays from Raikou. If you guys play mage at home, make sure that is something you definitely pay attention to.
As we can see, the Elemental Shamans are very similar to Balance Druid. Zeepai, that dark blue health is his health bar, and the tiny little one below that is a resource, and it is called Maelstrom, and it functions very similarly to Astral Power. As he casts damaging abilities, he will generate it, and he spends it on Earth Shock, which is just a massive hitting attack. If Earth Shock is coordinated at the same time as Star Surge, it can spell devastation for a team, so Morrow and Zeepai need to look to spend those resources and either coordinate them together with crowd control and the healer, or kind of split them up and try and force Chaz to use cooldowns incorrectly.
Yep, Morrow taking a little bit of burst damage midfield, but with the way Luna's positioned so far away, it's just really easy for him to top off. Both the Resto Druids playing on opposite sides of the maps. That basically allows them to go for drinks when they need to. You can see Chaz, he's in stealth right now. He's going to be sneaking away, trying to regenerate his mana by drinking. Raikou playing defense, playing right beside him. So if anyone tries to move in and stop that, he will be able to slow them down. But you can see Zeepai and Morrow, they realize the situation, but they couldn't really stop Chaz, so the next best thing they can do is try to force Chaz out of stealth by putting lots of pressure onto Swapsy and not allow Chaz to regenerate full. Unfortunately for them, he did manage to completely reset his mana as we enter dampening.
Morrow and Zeepai went for a coordinated attack towards Swapsy, and he was able to use Gladiator's Medallion to escape the stun and get to safety behind the pillar. The Gladiator's Medallion is that orange icon below the class icon, currently with 1 minute and 40 seconds remaining on Swapsy's frame, which means he cannot get out of crowd control for another minute and 36 seconds. So if he gets Lightning Lassoed, there is no choice but Chaz or Raikou to support him.
Yep, Zeepai looking for a Hex, gets interrupted. Morrow getting bursted down. Ray of Frost being channeled by Raikou. Looney still has the Iron Bark, so he should be able to stabilize. Looking for the regrowth cast, but that Lightning Lasso still doing tremendous amounts of damage, forcing Zeepai and Maro to shrink it out. Method Black able to get a lot done with Raiku's Icy Veins. His offensive cooldown increases his haste. It has a long cooldown, but Raiku's been doing a good job when he uses it, making sure he's at least forcing some defensives from Baba's boys.
We have just stepped foot into dampening at 7% as teams trade blows, taking quite a bit of damage, but no real momentum for either side just yet. Swapsy's still the target of choice here for Baba's boys, but Chaz immediately recovers his health, and I do believe Chaz is still potentially not running that Nourish talent. It may be something that Looney gets ahead in the game in terms of mana later on. Zeepai stable, Maro is stable. No real threats, though, with Incarnation and Stormkeeper both on cooldown. It's unlikely that Maro and Zeepai can get much going, and they're actually overextending with not much potential to deal damage, and this could be a mistake. I would like to see Maro and Zeepai pull back a bit and retreat. Zeepai seems reluctant. He's got full Maelstrom, that tiny bar below his health. He wants to expend that to deal a lot of damage, so he's going to push onto Raikou, Lightning Lasso, potentially double Earthshock. There's one Earthshock. Chaz is playing Nourish, so his mana is likely to be even with Looney throughout the fight. I like that adaptation on his part.
Yeah, I think it was smart, increasing his healing, increasing his throughput when he actually can get the casts out. And in a wizard setup like this, there's just so many important casted spells. Raikou has the Frostbolt and the Polymorph that they have to deal with. Then you have Swapsy with the Lightning Lasso. That really frees up the enemy druids to go for these Cyclones, go for these bash plays, and interrupts just aren't available because they're being used on their teammates.
All right, Maro trading Barkskin as Looney is sitting through crowd control and unable to heal him, which is a typical trade on a balanced druid, but now that that cooldown isn't available to reduce damage later on, he may need to play a bit more careful, unleashing 2 Star Surges here and a Stormkeeper getting lined up by Zeepai as he would like to chunk down Raikou. Swapsy is going to Thunderstorm him away, but Raikou actually just blinks back into the middle of the battlefield, getting stun-locked by Zeepai, trying to hold him in a Polymorph. Maro Lightning Lassoed away. Neither team really scratching the surface of each other's defense just yet. Dampening mounting up higher and higher. Swapsy appears to be the main target still for Baba's boys as he is quite low. Chaz catches it. No, he actually gets line of sighted on the Nourish. A bit of a mistake there from Swapsy. Chaz is tad bit annoyed by that. He's trying to still recover without trading cooldowns, and Swapsy actually has to come back out of line of sight as he is still low in health. He cannot afford to line of sight another Nourish, and Chaz says, no, Swapsy, please don't do that, and he is not going to, but a Solar Beam lands onto 2 members, well placed by Maro. Lots of damage coming out from Baba's boys as we finally see some momentum develop.
So at this point in the game, 21% dampening, what kind of things should Maro be looking for to actually use that Incarnation? Because you don't want to use it too early where they can line of sight. What are the moments you think he should be using it?
I mean, the main aggressive moment is Zeepai's Lightning Lasso, so that will hold a target in place, and then Maro can tee off on it with Incarnation. Aside from that, you can counter-engage, so if Raikou activates Icy Veins, he wants to attack. So if you activate Incarnation, it's a decision. Does he run away with his cooldown, or does he go toe-to-toe? And that could be an opportunity. So you look to see when the enemy team is attacking and counter-engage, or you use Zeepai's Lightning Lasso to hold a target in place, and those are typically the standard moments when you would want to activate Incarnation. Maro a bit on the back foot, but with that Bear Form Honor Talent combination, just shakes it off.
Yep, Zeepai line of sighting this Ray of Frost. Raikou trying to get some damage. Ray of Frost, a very powerful spell added to the Frost Mage. You can use it channel on a target when they are running out of line of sight. Similar to how Arcane Missiles work. If you start the channel when they're in line of sight, even if they run out, it continues to channel, and it is significant damage. So it's going to be important that Zeepai and Maro, they look for that, they interrupt it as much as possible, or use some sort of defense. It's especially powerful with the Icy Veins cooldown, which Raikou has up right now. This is the first time in the game Raikou has used his Icy Veins, and really they're not getting too much done. He's just trying to get the burst going on to Maro, but Looney just no crowd control. I would have liked to see Chaz play a little bit more aggressive there, or at least they wait for using that Icy Veins to counter-engage. Now with that threat gone, it's going to be easier for Baba's boys to make a decision to get aggressive.
All right, mana is completely even at this point. We're tied 1-1. We're in the lower bracket final. The loser of this will be going home in 3rd place. The winner of this will have a rematch against the Chalky Milk boys in that final, although they have been 3-0'd. Both of these teams 3-0'd by them, so hopefully they have some new strategies to take them on in the final for the day, as this Wizard war continues on. The battle of attrition. Both druids quite healthy on mana as we move deeper into dampening. I would say that Baba's boys have had a lot more momentum though during moments, and it seems if that's the case in dampening, they may be able to pull off a victory. But Maro gets caught out of bear form in a lightning lasso, and they decide to commit for it to try and take him out. Baba's boys, they overextend their defensive lineup and then end up getting cycloned at low health. And another moment like that deeper into dampening, and Maro, you're not making it out alive.
That is true, but that was all 3 Maledicts from Method Black, so they tried to get aggressive, take down Maro, but they responded appropriately. They used the renewal, the Barkskin, the Iron Bark from Looney, making Maro exceptionally tanky, but like you said, later on in dampening, if we get back to 65%, which I think is looking more and more likely with the way this match is playing out, Maro's deciding, you know what, we've been in there a little too long. They got my defensives, going back to retreat to the pillar. Iron Bark, Barkskin, these cooldowns don't have a long timer, so they can afford to just run away, reset those before they want to get aggressive again.
Zeepai, well-placed grounding totem as he returns fire to Raikou. And both teams are just trying to push out. It actually seems like Maro and Zeepai are retreating. They do not want to get caught. Maro gets Nova in midfield, bursted down a tad bit. Looney lining up some heals. Swapsy gets interrupted defensively there with the Solar Beam. Typically you want to use that on the healer because it's such a long cooldown and you want it as a threat, but he's desperate. He has to use it to break up some damage and stall the game out until he can get some more cooldowns like Barkskin, which is now available, so he will have that safety net. Counterspell on Maro, knocking him away from any potential Cyclone threat onto Chaz, but Maro immediately pushes forward to look for another opportunity. Not able to find it. I believe Swapsy denied it, but now actually gets it. If Zeepai and Maro can generate some resource here to Star Surge and Earthshock, it could be devastating. 1 Star Surge towards Raikou. Chaz is, however, out of crowd control. Swapsy's left in midfield. Zeepai and Maro going to turret over there and turn their attention. Swapsy ducks around the corner, immediately healing surging himself, tucking himself around again with Lightning Lasso to avoid wind shear. Accidentally max ranges himself there and interrupts it onto Maro himself. Tons of damage there. Earthshock hit and Maro gets bursted. I did say that Baba's boys burst looked a lot better earlier in the game. Now Maro going to opt to activate Incarnation during Icy Veins, and this is where they go toe-to-toe, try and take each other out. That Maro may be the one that takes the brunt of this exchange going toe-to-toe, especially at 50% dampening, and he opts to just immediately retreat away.
Yeah, Maro trying to do some damage. This is a place where Method Black does not want to be. If Maro can charge in and get out damage, it's going to be horrifying. Swapsy getting low. Astral Shift was used. Looney gets a beautiful Cyclone on Chaz. Swapsy has to survive it at 48% dampening. These healing surges aren't doing too much. Chaz trying to keep him alive, gets the Iron Bar connected, but another beautiful Cyclone from Looney, doing such a terrific job. Swapsy's HP, it's frozen. He really can't get away. Maro's trying to chase Lightning Lasso. Swapsy trinkets out to avoid that damage. Now a bash on Chaz. All 3 members will rot down, and that's where this Moonkin pick is really going to pay off. If he can keep his dots on Chaz, on Raikou, on Swapsy, those damage over time effects are going to add up, especially at this point. 51% dampening.
Yeah, this composition, while we were questioning it to begin with, could end up paying off as we get deeper and deeper into dampening. Zeepai and Maro's sustained pressure a lot higher than Raikou, but Raikou's burst is going to be a lot higher, so Raikou needs to find that perfect moment, that one opportunity to take a target down. If he can't find it, he's simply going to get overwhelmed by the tide of damage that Baba's boys will be dishing out, and he is getting currently overwhelmed. Cycloned at low health on Iron Bark. That threat is definitely paying its weight in gold as Looney makes a move, jumps on top of Chaz, secures further crowd control. Raikou isolated, out in midfield, has to ice block the incoming Star Surge. May just fall right out of the ice block with Stormkeeper lined up. Chaz is going to switch his attention. Multiple members at critically low health as Zeepai and Maro have them completely surrounded. They're looking to put Method Black on match point. Chaz activates Innervate, gets a lot of expensive heals off for free with that perfect timing. If there was a way to keep it alive, it's going to be that play from Chaz, but there's just too much damage to handle as Raikou holds on by the seat of his pants. The triple Solar Beam. Somehow Chaz is still doing it and keeping him alive. Raikou tries to reverse the pressure despite all of this damage is being tossed at him.
Yeah, Swapsy's low. He is the main target for them. Doesn't want to get too low without using that Astral Shift. Stormkeeper has been activated. Who's he going to go after? Maro looks to be the target. He's trying to get out of line of sight with the bear form. One Maledict connects. Potentially a second. Swapsy in trouble too. Both teams could fall. Swapsy trying to get away, but he's all by himself. Gets wind sheared on the heels. Zeepai looking to close out this game. Chaz doing everything he can to keep him alive with the nourishes. Zeepai knocks him in midfield, but now Zeepai's overextended. Maro getting low as well. Raikou doing a good job making sure pressure. He's counter-pressuring, has the Icy Veins up in 14 seconds, and that could be the last cooldown Method Black needs to take down someone from Baba's Boys.
I feel like this might be a rare case where we see a player die on both teams at the same time, almost, if Dampening keeps getting this high. 63% healing reduction. The Druids are almost tapped on mana. Raiku's still on the back foot. Chaz locked in crowd control and can't assist. Both members low, but Morrow is low as well. And this is what I was saying. It could be a cross kill, potentially with 2 players dying on each individual team. Icy Veins activated. Raikou has to get a kill with this.
Carnation.
He needs to. Morrow could answer and go toe-to-toe. I'm surprised. There it is. Immediately locking Raikou. Star Surges are about to be incoming towards Raikou as both Morrow and Raikou are in danger town. Morrow actually opts to just be defensive. He's pinned down. Raikou is just going to take him out. And despite the turning tide of damage, Method Black pull it off, going toe-to-toe. Raikou comes out ahead.
They're going to pluck that chicken without too much of a problem. Well, if you consider 67% dampening not too much of a problem, we were very firmly in danger town, as Sid did say, and we got a new record. Again, I feel like we may even see a few new ones today. Zico, the Mugen, all in all. How'd you like it?
Well, the thing that it comes down to is that last portion of the game. When Morrow gets that last incarnation, I thought, okay, the game is going to be over here. Morrow has Incarnation. Incarnation being the strongest offensive cooldown, of course, pretty much in the game at this point, especially when dampening is this high. But it's very, very tricky when you play Boomkin, because if the enemy team is forcing CC onto Zeepai like they are right here, Shaz doing a phenomenal job landing those clones, it frees up Swapsy and Raikou to force Morrow to camp out in that bear form. And when Morrow just has to sit in bear form, well, he's pretty much a sitting duck. And the only real advantage that you have with the Moonkin, in my mind, that really matters for the outcome of the game at this stage is that Incarnation. And when you can't utilize it because he has to play defensive, even if Morrow survives there, you're not going to have a win condition anymore. Like we said in the pre-game, the Frost Mage, he's going to have less of a strong punch, but he's going to be able to punch more often. Whereas the Boomkin, he's going to be doing more consistent damage, which is going to be easily out-healed, of course, by these Resto Druids. And then he's going to have that one big punch with the Incarnation every 3 minutes. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get that same value as the previous one in the game, and then he gets taken down mostly because of the cross CC onto Zeepai. Shutting down Zeepai was the key to victory there.
Yeah, it's all a game about using that defensive utility, too, to have more of those big goes. Sid, when we get into the next game, do you want to see more Moonkin action, or you think we're going back to the Mage?
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, they were having the advantage, I think, for most of the game, and then if maybe Ebon Bolt wasn't used on, or sorry, if Solar Beam was not used to interrupt Ebon Bolt and Solar Beam was used to interrupt Cyclone and Zeepai was free, that could have been the opportunity. But you've spent such a long game to get to that point where it literally comes down to maybe 5 spell usages in a row during that moment to get a kill. And if you make just one mistake, then the other person gets out ahead, and that could just be frustrating in it a little bit. So Morrow making the decision saying, oh, Ebon Bolt's a big threat, I want to remove it and interrupt Frost, and maybe I'll counter-aggress. But then he was able to get a Cyclone onto his partner, and without his partner supporting, Incarnation wasn't that threatening, and they were just pinning him down in bear form. If the Solar Beam was used to break up crowd control instead of damage, then both members would have been free. But then basically all the damage members are free, and who wins at that? It's risky. It feels a lot more risky, so I don't really blame him for the interrupt usage that he did end up committing, but I don't know. It's a tough decision. I think maybe the mirror would be better, maybe on a smaller map if they just keep moving in and out of line of sight and focus more on Moonfire, Sunfire, and Flame Shock to deal damage, and less about going toe-to-toe in the open. They could pull off a win that way.
Yeah, against the Chalky Milk Men.
All right, Baba's Boys with Morrow, a new addition to the team. I bet they wish they had Walrix, I think, for this. Having a powerful Destruction Warlock could be an option for them to take out Method Black's wizardy composition that they've been leading the charge here today, the Elemental Shaman and Frost Mage, but they don't got it. They kicked Walrix off, he's gone, and now they've got to make it work with Morrow. I'm not sure if they can. Method Black punishing Morrow late in the game in that last attempt and taking him out. Potentially a game 5 here. Both teams face elimination, and in the first cup to qualify to the spring finals, you want your best performance. You need to accumulate the most amount of points to qualify to that land, which obviously getting first place will help you do. Going in third place isn't that terrible, but these two teams were top contenders. They both went to the World Finals last year, and they want to start the year off right, so they're going to give it their all.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Zeepai taking a little damage early on. Now, talking about talent selection a little bit, Chaz playing the Restoration Druid. I think he's playing the Mark of the Wild. How effective is that going to be against Zipa and Maro?
I mean, it's very effective as the Balanced Druid deals a lot of nature damage. It's going to be quite effective. I think Mark of the Wild is a very good talent selection in this matchup in particular. The only time you wouldn't necessarily take it is against shadow damage dealers. So this is Shadow Priest, this is Warlock, but against Elemental Shaman, against Mage, and against Balanced Druid, other than Arcane Mage, anything that's fire. Actually, I believe it is Arcane as well. So basically anything that isn't a Shadow Priest or a Warlock, Mark of the Wild is super effective, and I think Chaz is making the right move on that talent pick.
Yeah, it's really just going to reduce the overall amount of damage Maro and Zipa are able to put out, because that is going to be one of Maro's main advantage on the Moonkin. The fact that he does have those damage over time abilities, so reducing that going to be very intelligent still. It looks like Maro is taking your advice, Super Tease. He's going to be sitting back out of line of sight. Doesn't really want to allow Raikou to build up as much damage as he did in the last game, looking for those Frost Bolts. Build up those icicles, generate those procs, continue the damage rolling on Zipa. Primal Elemental is going to be dropped out by Zipa, trying to deflect Swapsy just a little bit here.
Comet Storm and Ice Nova are great instant cast burst damage, but Maro and Zipa have more frequency in terms of that instant cast burst, so it makes more sense for them to stay at a pillar and deny Frostbolt and Ebonbolt. Maro instead decides to charge forward. Obviously, before dampening, he can kind of play recklessly, although he is on match point and dipping kind of low and really not respecting the damage capability of Method Black. He manages to make it out alive with Looney's protection and his own Gladiator's medallion, but being on match point and playing a bit sloppy there with that aggressive push. Arcanic Pulsar, I believe, activating Incarnation here for Maro, so it's not the super big, strong one. And you would like to save 2 Star Surges right before you hit 9 in a row so that you can do at least 1 with that Incarnation when it activates off the 9th cast. In that position, Maro did, but not able to really penetrate through the Restoration Druid healing at this point in the game. Dampening is definitely a requirement, I think, especially in this matchup between these compositions. As we move forward, Chaz is just looking for Drink. He's going to regenerate mana back to full and have an advantage over Looney as a result. And when you're playing a very slow and steady late game match, you always want to be looking for opportunities to drink, to regenerate mana, and have that ability to press powerful, expensive heals later in the game when your more efficient ones become less effective.
Yep, it's absolutely true. You can see Swapsy in the midfield trying to push in on Maro, and a little bit earlier on in the game we saw Maro trying to get a little aggressive, but unfortunately it was forcing him to use his renewal. He had to use his Bark Skin, Gladiator Safeguard, one of the new trinkets activated. That trinket is a lifeline that these players have if they are deciding to use it. Basically what it does is if you dip under 25% HP, you gain the shield from a trinket. I think it has a 2-minute timer on it, so that can be something that does save your life in these matchups, and I think a lot of the players are trying to utilize it with the other new trinket, Gladiator's Maledict, which is a little bit more offense. So they're utilizing both offense and defense, one to keep them alive, one to help them close out the game, and I think it's an intelligent choice.
Pressure's definitely on for Baba Boys as they are on match point. They lose this, they go home. And when you have that type of pressure put on you and it comes down to maybe 5 spell casts very deep into dampening, so maybe 10 minutes from now, 5 spells, 10 minutes from now decide the game. That's a lot of stress to be put on your shoulders, and they may get over eager or overly defensive and not make necessarily the correct move at the correct time. They need absolute precision, even though it's a slow and steady game. They want to be min-maxing their capabilities because obviously Method Black is going to be, and they've got a lot less pressure on their shoulders. Zeepite leading the charge for his team here, bursting down Swapsy. Chaz immediately responds and has a great recovery. Zeepite activates Stormkeeper. He's looking to connect some big lightning bolts, going after Raikou with those. Chaz will activate Innervate. All of his spells are free, and he can use Regrowth, a very expensive heal, or even Nourish for free during this time and save a lot of mana for later in the fight. Chaz definitely playing effective in terms of his mana management.
Yep, and one of the new things that was added in this patch, one of the new Azurite traits these players are having the opportunity to take advantage of, is one of the reasons why these games are going into dampening a little bit longer is something called Bonded Souls. A lot of the players are taking advantage of that. Basically, it's an Azurite power, has a chance to proc, and what happens is you heal yourself as well as your closest ally. I think it's within 100-yard range. You both get healed up, and you both get a little bit of extra haste, but all of that healing throughout the game really does add up, especially when all 3 members are using it.
Definitely look out for that Bonded Souls Azurite trait. If you're playing on live realms, you definitely want to be getting your hands on that one to try and compete on the ladder and push for your own personal ranks. Of course, if you're tuning into the tournament today, it's a good opportunity to see what kind of compositions are being played at the highest level, what kind of gear, Azurite traits, talents are being selected so that you yourself can take advantage of them and achieve your own feats of strength. We've seen a lot of new players come up in the ranks, so you could easily go from being a viewer to a competitor in just some short time if you really want to put the effort into it. So definitely look to try and take as much as you can from these professional players as they are playing at the highest level. Dampening has started and is reducing healing by 7% currently, but between these two teams we have seen gigantic numbers, 60% and in excess of that, so it is likely to be the same result here on Tiger's Peak. Baba's boys face elimination. Chaz constantly looking for drinks here in the corner, resetting his mana bar. You can tell that even though these games are quite dragging on, Chaz is still in it to win it. He wants that championship. He got it stolen away by the move last year, and Method Black are going to be playing it out with their entire arsenal available here in the first tournament, and they're just one win away from a rematch against the Chalky Milk Boys.
Yep, Chaz and Looney both taking advantage of the fact that right now healing isn't too intensive, so they want to be resetting their mana at 12% dampening. Most teams would be pretty scared, but with the way these matchups are going, we're going up to around 60% dampening in order for it to actually close out. So these players have an opportunity to make sure they're playing patient, load up their cooldowns and save it for when they really need it, and they can put out that additional damage to really push through that healing. That's why I think it's smart for Maro and Raikou. The major offensive cooldowns they have available are that Incarnation for Maro and the Icy Veins for Raikou. So they don't want to be throwing those away. That's when they can really overwhelm their damage through the enemy Druid's healing and try to push through.
All right, Raikou and Swapsy are starting to fall a little bit behind here on pressure, but mana is entirely equivalent on both teams, so moving forward there's no advantage necessarily, but we've seen how quickly this game can turn at 60% dampening. It looks like Maro's in the lead, but then suddenly Raikou just punches him quickly back in the nose and he just falls over, so I don't know if it's going to be the case. I feel like Maro could have an advantage if he's able to line of sight and avoid Raikou, but currently he is not. Raikou is freely casting on him, and Maro is just soaking a lot of damage that he does not necessarily need to. It may be the case that Swapsy just has him surrounded. Swapsy behind Maro and Raikou to the left. It's difficult for him to really pick where he wants to go, but standing between both is definitely a mistake later in the game that could just take him down.
Yeah, Maro still positioned on the pillar looking for some solar rats. Both Raikou and Maro just trying to avoid as much damage as possible. Swapsy now going for a Lightning Lasso on Maro. Chaz and Swapsy kind of playing on top of Maro. I like that offensive Cyclone. Now there's an opportunity. If they could push in and get any crowd control on Looney, they might be able to force out a couple more cooldowns. And at this point in dampening, you know, probably the game won't end, but if you can start forcing out Barkskin from Maro, Iron Bark from Looney, that's when you can really take advantage of the fact that they don't have those cooldowns to fall back on as well. These players have been saving their Gladiator's Maledict. There's one coming in from Raikou as they look to get aggressive onto Maro. He uses the Barkskin. Frozen Orb does get dropped out, but Raikou, using the Maledict and his Frozen Orb, decides to run away. Not an ideal trade for him, and unfortunately kind of wasting both of those abilities. Want to make sure that all three members are going to use that cooldown at the same time at the perfect moment, and that's really how they're going to be able to close it out.
As you pointed out, Maro was forced to use his Barkskin, so that box below his health with a 30 on it. It's going to be 29, 28 more seconds until he can use it again to reduce damage. This is an opening that Method Black are trying to take advantage of currently by bursting him down as the primary target, but he is bouncing back into the battle, going into Incarnation with that Arcanic Pulsar Azurite traits. 9 Star Surges, Incarnation for a little bit of time, and you can get some added damage with it. Raikou and Swapsy respect that and immediately pull away, but they actually get clotheslined by Zeepai, and Zeepai really wants to tie this up, bring it to a game 5, but Chaz is able to recover and restabilize the team. We're halfway to that critical mass point of 60% dampening, so things inevitably will end for one side, and it could come down to just 3 spell casts to decide someone's life at that point in the game, and you cannot afford to make a mistake. Even though you have to play very focused throughout the match to make sure you don't go down before that point, you may be a little bit fatigued and as a result make a mistake, and you just cannot afford to in the lower bracket, as you will be sent home and lose a huge opportunity at points and prize. So let's see who ends up cracking underneath this pressure. Raikou currently getting bursted. Solar Beam onto Chaz, and immediately recovers. Now Raikou is trying to push forward towards Maro, and for some reason I feel like Maro is going to be the one that goes down in this matchup, just under so much pressure currently by Method Black.
Yeah, I think what ends up happening with the Moonkin is you eventually just have to camp bear form. You're taking too much damage, and you're not able to get out the damage you really need. Maro just been sitting in bear form, uses the bark skin. Looney has to commit the trinket and the iron bark, and this is perfect for Method Black. They were able to get out so many defensive cooldowns. Mind you, Raikou did use the Icy Vein, so he won't have that available until much later on in the game. Maro smartly, patiently waiting for that incarnation, waiting for healing to be reduced even more, looking for some Maledict trinkets onto Raikou, reducing the incoming healing. Chaz trying to top him off. Raikou, a second Maledict lands on him, so Baba's boys, they commit those offensive cooldowns to try to take down Raikou and get some counter pressure, which was much needed. I feel like Maro was forced too defensive for too long. These lightning lassos are going to be a very effective ability against bear form in particular. It does increase your bear form does increase your max health, so lightning lasso doing percentage-based damage is going to be really effective at sort of wrangling up that bear, taking him down relatively fast.
We're 2/3 of the way there to critical mass at 60% dampening, where the game can be decided in a split second. I'm curious to see who ends up coming out ahead. Right now, Baba's boys have re-stabilized. Their defensive lineup is ready and waiting, but so is the defensive line of Method Black. So it's going to come down to who cracks under the pressure, who ends up making a mistake, and at that point, it could be simply Method Black advancing for a rematch, or even Baba's boys moving up to a Game 5 for a rematch attempt in the finals as well. Chalky Milk Boys have just been dominating basically every team in this tournament. The Titans, the newcomers, everybody. Gelu Baba's new roster looks unbeatable, and I'm curious to see out of these two teams if either of them can actually take them down. Chaz getting swapped too by the team of Baba's boys, but Chaz actually leading the charge with crowd control currently not secured. Zeepai broke it up with a well-timed grounding totem. Good support by Zeepai, but Maro is still under fire. Looney needs to work through that, desperately trying to pick him back up. I do not like Maro playing out here in center field. I'd much rather see him closer to a pillar and focus on bouncing back and forth in and out of line of sight. Raikou is currently running away, and now they have a decision. Do they push forward? Do they hunt them down and risk dying in an overextended push at 50% dampening, or do they just stay in midfield and continue more of the same? The pressure is going to start to get there. The mental stress as well of this extended series on both sides is going to start ticking away at their minds. I can only imagine over time. Chaz has recovered. Mana is still fairly even, potentially an advantage to Looney. Raikou getting bursted, Maro getting bursted, and it's going to come down to a split second here shortly, as we are just 9% away from critical mass on dampening.
Yeah, and look at Raikou. He almost has that Icy Veins back up. Chaz actually getting interrupted. Swapsy has to trinket out. Method Black could be in a world of trouble here. Maro pulls the trigger on the incarnation, trying to run Method Black over at 53% dampening, and the burst damage does come in. The Moonkin pays off, and Baba's boys, they tie it up.
We are going to see one of those big goes finally come to fruition. And just like that, Baba's boys going to tie up this series. We're going to a Game 5. Zico, now that we've seen the Moonkin ultimately hit that ultimate form, do we change anything up on the other side?
Well, I don't think that Baba's boys are going to blind lock that Moonkin, because then they are for sure going to be facing that Rogue Mage Druid from Method Black, and the Moonkin should fall in that matchup. But the Moonkin paid off. They did what Sid essentially wanted them to do. They didn't drag out the game maybe to super long dampening, but Maro played a little bit more reserved, trying to just use those instants and line of sight a little bit more to get those that astral power, to get those star surges off. And then of course here we see Zeepai chasing down Swapsy relentlessly with that Stormkeeper, having a lot of damage with those Maledict trinkets as well. And that's all you need. If you get a good incarnation setup there, in deep dampening, you have the threat of just completely going through all of those defensive cooldowns, the Iron Bark and the Astral Shift, and instead just take somebody down. And that's what Mario needs to be doing. Get someone to run behind the pillar, get low, and then Zeepai can chase him down and try to finish off the target.
Sitting there in the grand finals, and you are maybe cheering for the Chalky Milkman, a team that has gone incredibly fast. Gelu and the squad have just been going straight for the throat of every single team. You look at Baba's boys and you go, what could they possibly have against the Chalky Milkman? We don't expect necessarily much to be thrown out there. It is going to be on Method Black. This is the team that could potentially challenge the team already waiting in the grand finals, and this composition going to be very telling of what tools they would have to do it. It's going to come down to this game. The winner of this goes to the grand final in our first cup of the year.
Baba's boys need an answer to Rogue Mage. Maybe, perhaps, this Elemental Shaman Mage can work, which then means it's a threat for the Chalky Milkmen in the grand final. We will be momentarily figuring that out as both teams are on game 5. The winner of this stays in the tournament. The loser goes home. A lot on the line, and Method Black are going to lead the initiation, but get denied on their crowd control on Looney, and that is not what you want to see for Method Black. Baba's boys have an opportunity to strike back.
Really good pet control from Zeepai there. He summoned the Primal Elementalist. It has a stun. So what he did when Waz went in, he got the cheap shot on Looney. You saw Zeepai use his pet, use the stun on Raikou, and basically shut down any incoming crowd control. Raikou now getting polymorphed up on that Greater Power Blast. He is playing that ability. Very effective ability for dealing damage if you can get it off, but it's a difficult thing to do, especially when you have a mage like Maro just spamming polymorph and interrupts on you. You have Zeepai with the Grounding Totem and the Wind Shear. So look to see if Raikou can get those off in the downtime outside of crowd control. That's typically what you see a Fire Mage do.
Oh, this crowd control on Looney was sick. They got a sap out of a Cyclone. Chaz cast Hibernate. Raikou cast Polymorph. They're definitely on point for their Rogue Mage, which we are likely to see a mirror with the Chalky Milkmen in the finals should Method Black make their way there, and I would love to see that. Zeepai, in the meantime, is doing a great job kiting away. It is not an easy feat to deal with an Assassination Rogue. That is the greatest weakness of an Elemental Shaman, and it's been the bane of Zeepai's existence for years at this point, maybe half a decade of him just dealing with Rogue Mage. So he is a veteran, but let's see if he can overcome one of the best being Method Black. Raikou channeling out Greater Pyros, but taking a ton of damage himself, and Chaz is suddenly behind. They swap to Looney. Pressure on both sides.
He got 2 Greater Power Blasts on Looney. Looney could be in some trouble. He doesn't even use the Bark Skin. A little bit greedy there by Looney, but ultimately it pays off. I really thought Raikou doing a nice job with those Greater Power Blasts. I think he was using the Focus Greater Power Blast. So a lot of high-rated mages, what they'll do is they'll use a macro to sort of disguise where their Greater Power Blast is going. It does so much damage. You can really catch your opponent off guard by having a macro with Greater Power Blast. Keep buying that, and then you can just kind of use it on whoever your focus target is. Your teammates or the enemy team won't really know who it's on, and you can take advantage of that in burst windows.
All right, Waz moves in game 5. Obviously, both these teams are fatigued as this is the longest series we've seen in a really long time, and he's trying to make the moves to take him down. But Baba's boys, they are definitely best friends with dampening. So if there was a team to not be that fatigued this long into a series, it would be them. So perhaps Method Black run out of steam. How much experience do they have in deep dampening? They've used to these high-intensity Rogue Mage matchups, whereas Baba boys have years of experience with the Lock Shaman Druid. It may actually be that Baba's boys have the experience in such a fatiguing series to pull this off.
Yeah, I think that might be true. Waz still has a Cloak of Shadows and Vanish and his Vendetta. Kidney shot on Zeepai. Doesn't commit the Vendetta just yet. Maybe potentially looking to bait out some cooldowns. Nice Cyclone by Chaz, freezing Zeepai's HP as he pushes in, looking for the bash onto Looney. Does he get the follow-up Cyclone? He does. Now Zeepai could be in some trouble. Combustion was used by Raikou, looking for the Greater Power Blast. Nice Grounding Totem by Zeepai to avoid that damage. And Waz still holding on to the Vendetta. They were able to get the Astral Shift from Zeepai in that last go, so I think splitting up the cooldowns, Waz and Raikou doing a good job, and now the next opportunity on Zeepai could be devastating.
Waz is going to go for it, trying to gun down for the kill, surprisingly not committing Vendetta during this moment of vulnerability, and instead cycloning Zeepai. Waz actually used his Cloak of Shadows when he still had that Gladiator Safeguard, and Gladiator Safeguard is a new addition trinket that provides you a shield when you're bursted low. Waz didn't feel like it was going to be enough, that safety net, and he overlapped defensive cooldown, so now he could be an exposed target. Both Zeepai and Waz are in trouble, but Zeepai is falling behind. Now they reverse it with Lightning Lasso, gets interrupted. Now Zeepai's on the back foot. How's Looney going to deal with it? Tons of damage. Iron Bark catches a quick heal and manages to pop himself potentially back into the match, but he's falling more and more behind. If Baba's boys can't pull this off, they're going to be going home. Pressure mounting in favor as Waz pulls the trigger on that Vendetta. Zeepai needs to make a getaway. He's trying in Ghost Wolf, but he just can't seem to get away from Waz. That frozen orb holding Waz down for a few more seconds. Vendetta's threat has now faded. Zeepai is likely to recover. Chaz locked down in crowd control, but unfortunately overlapped a bit. Looney and Morrow, their Druid Mage synergy, the coordination there gets dropped, and Chaz is now free to heal. They try and capitalize with a Cyclone on Waz, denying healing for a couple of seconds. Chaz moves over. He needs to get there quick. Tons of damage by Zeepai and Morrow. Waz now recovers. We have not even stepped foot into dampening. Being the longest series we've seen, obviously these teams are experiencing at least some amount of frustration on top of anxiety in this series, as their tournament lives are on the line and they cannot afford to make a mistake at this point. And it's just going to get more and more stressful. We see a Lightning Lasso once again on Waz. Those are the critical moments for Zeepai to strike back. Waz shakes it off and leads the charge for his team.
Yeah, Waz moving in, gets the kidney shot on Zeepai, but he's in the Ghost Wolf. One of the really powerful things about Ghost Wolf is it suppresses movement impairing abilities, so you can move at basically full speed in Ghost Wolf. So if Morrow can support Zeepai by putting snares on Waz and Raikou, it becomes very difficult for them to actually chase, and that's why it's so effective at running around these pillars and avoiding damage. That's why Waz, they really need to coordinate these the damage during these kidney shot moments where Zeepai, he can't run away in Ghost Wolf, but unfortunately they just haven't found the damage so far in the series.
All right, Waz managing to get a re-stealth, setting up the team maybe for victory. Zeepai's on the run. Lightning Lasso to hold Waz away, but with no crowd control on Chaz, he easily heals through that, and Waz is just relentlessly tunneling down Zeepai. Nice Thunderstorm. He's going to duck around the corner, catch a quick heal while Looney is still crowd control. Chaz and Raikou have taken complete control of both Morrow and Looney, but Zeepai's winning the 1v1 with Waz, so he's able to even it out quite effectively, and it's really on his shoulders as an individual to try and deal with Waz. Waz, though, quite sneaky, constantly getting these re-stealths, setting up triple crowd control once again. No follow-up, unfortunately, so Looney will escape and connect some heals on Zeepai and start to stabilize. The defense of both teams has completely equalized moving to dampening. The mana is still equal. It's still anyone's match. We're on game 5. Winner take all here to get to the grand finals. Waz gets pressured, once again overlapping that safeguard trinket with Cloak of Shadows. He's an open target, but Method Black are leading the charge. They've got triple crowd control, and it looks good. Zeepai on the run. He needs to avoid Raikou at all costs in Ghost Wolf. Will it be enough here? Maledicts to soak up all the healing. Looney's got a hard time here. Hard task ahead of him to recover. They managed to make it out without trading really anything. I believe Zeepai using that Fire Blood racial to remove all the damage over time effects. Very well timed by him and diffusing what would have otherwise been a kill. Great play by Zeepai. Can he keep it up though?
Polymorph on tomorrow. Kidney shot on Zeepai. Nice triple cross crowd control. Off kick by Waz on Looney as well. He had to trinket out. Kidney shot on Zeepai. He as well had to use the Astral Shift. He's trying to get away. The Maledict is reducing all of the incoming healing, but finally Looney and Zeepai able to reconnect. Waz is just snared away. Morrow doing everything he can to support his team by keeping them snared, trying to generate pressure. It's not an easy task for Morrow in this game. Double coming out. Zeepai in a lot of trouble. Raikou getting low as well. Could be his ice block, but he does have the cauterize to fall back on, so it's not that scary for Raikou. Zeepai is the one that's in a lot of trouble now, but still out of line of sight. Should be able to survive despite the Cyclones coming in from Chaz onto Looney. Zeepai's just not taking the pressure.
All right, Zeepai, how much longer can you keep this going? You're running out of cooldowns. Dampening's getting pretty high. You just played the longest series of your life, and if you lose this, that's a very feels bad moment, so he's got to keep it up under the intensity and try and find an opportunity. You would normally say that Rogue Mage is favored in this matchup, but this Ghost Wolf build on these Elemental Shamans seems to make them just durable enough to extend the game. We see a swap by Method Black potentially here onto Looney. Can they do it? Can they KO the Dampening Lord Looney? He's going to jump tomorrow, escape around the corner, and start to recover. Waz not able to stay on target, instead trying to re-stealth potentially for this assault, and he does get it. Shadow stepping into the entire team and still gunning down Looney. This is a risky target to go after the healer and leave Morrow and Zeepai open, but it seems like they want to take the risk here in game 5.
Yeah, Waz caught into a lightning lasso. Zeepai and Looney once again crossing the map. They do not want to play on top of Raikou and Chaz. They always want to be creating space. That way they can take full advantage of the fact that Morrow has such powerful snares as that Frost Mage and really limit the mobility that they have. Good burst damage on Raikou. He could be in some trouble, but the Iron Bar comes in from Chaz. Nice triple CC coming in once again. Waz trying to set up his team. Cyclone on Morrow into another Cyclone. Nicely done by Chaz. Now there's no support for Zeepai. He has to use the Astral Shift. He's trying trying to kite away behind the pillar, but Waz is all over him. Looney's still in crowd control, a full Cyclone if Raikou and Waz can connect, but look at Maro, he's doing such a good job. Polymorph on Waz, into a Polymorph, into a Frost Nova, and Zeepai can get away and heal himself up.
Yeah, both teams equalize again here at 25% dampening, and that's just going to keep ramping up higher and higher. These situations where Raikou's getting bursted would be ice blocks. These situations where Zeepai could just die will be his death. Waz gets bursted, he's overextended. Chaz is trying to back him up, connecting a couple of regrowths, but again, as I say, dampening is getting higher and higher. Zeepai Looney running laps around the arena. Maro trying to disrupt and burst as much as possible. Blind is trinketed by Looney. Smoke bomb gets dropped. Waz trying to make the game-winning play. Looney in position. He's not falling for the bait. He's not going to move in and maybe get sapped as he moves into the smoke bomb. Waz likely to try and make a high-level play like that. Looney jumps in, stuns up Chaz, tries to slow down the crowd control for his team, but gets interrupted by Waz. Waz making the plays here towards the end of the match. Interrupts like this could close it out. Zeepai pauses the game with Lightning Lasso. Waz gets bursted. Chaz responds. Bit of a panic attack on Chaz's part, using both Barkskin and Ironbark. You can tell that the pressure is starting to cook here for both sides as it's Game 5 in the longest series we've had in years. A lot on the line to qualify to the Grand Finals. Both these teams qualified to the World Finals last year, and they want the best shot moving into 2019, and they're so evenly matched.
Yeah, full Ring of Frost into a sap on Looney. Zeepai uses the Astral Shift, but a nice Cyclone from Chaz, not allowing Looney to get any healing really connected. He does have the Iron Bark, doesn't want to use it too late, but we know Baba's boys, they like to play it greedy. They don't want to overlap. Raikou looking for a greater Power Blast. And honestly, Raikou has not got many of those off in this game, and I think that's just to credit Maro and Zeepai with how well they really have been paying attention to that and shutting it down with the Grounding Totem, the Wind Shear, the Polymorph spam. It's been difficult for Raikou, but he does blink in and manage to, I think, land one on Zeepai, and a little bit later in dampening. Those are just devastating for Looney to heal through.
Zeepai's had to do this with Raikou constantly in deep, deep dampening, go toe-to-toe with just nothing but damage to their name. Looney makes a move. Baba's boys want to close this out and have a rematch. Will they be able to do it? They've got crowd control on Chaz. Raikou could be in trouble. Waz is low as well as Maro gets polymorphed away. Good support by Raikou to save Waz. Is it going to be enough? He's very low. He wants to stay aggressive, instead opting to Cyclone Zeepai. Stall out the fight for a few seconds as dampening keeps creeping forward. That will inevitably close the game out, and they want momentum in their favor, but Chaz leads the charge. Crowd control on Looney, crowd control on Maro. Zeepai once again in a 1v1 versus Waz, but able to kite and then bait him around the pillar for a Lightning Lasso. Now actually polymorphing Waz and trying to reset a bit. It was a bit of a peculiar polymorph. Now actually still gunning into Waz and trying to do some damage. There's definitely a miscommunication there if they wanted to peel Waz away or commit for damage, and that miscommunication could cost Zeepai's life.
Yeah, Zeepai getting lower. Maledict trinkets are connecting. 41% dampening. This damage of the Assassination Rogue, of the Fire Mage, might just be too much for even Looney to heal through. Ironbark is committed. Zeepai does have the Astral Shift. He wants to use that as soon as possible to avoid damage. He does the second he gets out of Cyclone, but I don't know. This kidney shot, this dampening, I don't think Baba's voice is going to be able to survive. Raikou finding some damage. Zeepai still trying to kite away on 5% HP. Looney desperately trying to heal him, but gets bashed on his trinket. Nicely done by Method Black, and this is the composition, this is the strategy we wanted to see for them to take him down.
And now we really do need to assess how powerful that strategy is. It's going to get Method Black the win here, but is it enough to potentially get them a win on the day? Zico, we'll break down this series, but then we do need to look ahead because the grand final is right around the corner. Why did it work when they break it out in this Game 5?
I think it came down to the map pick, honestly. In the previous maps, it's just been big map after big map selected. They went through Tolveron, they went through Ashamains, they went through Nagrand, and then on this map, Waz can actually get that uptime, a lot of value on this Vendetta that was used about 30 seconds ago here on the Zeepai, which was the biggest reason to why this pressure started mounting here onto Zeepai. They finally got a little bit of crowd control onto Looney before that, and then Waz in deep dampening with the addition of the Mortal Strike healing reduction that the Aster Rogue has as well, can just be able to do what we saw here